from a movie scene. Say to my, but what don't you mean? I am the one who will dance on the floor in a round. She said, I am the one who will dance on the floor in a round.
Non? A ver, bai? Ja? Bueno, egunon guztioi.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for being here. I'm going to make a very short introduction of Siri Hustvedt.
Yo solamente es por acompañar a Siri.
I just wanted to be here with Siri and say some words about her. And to us, it is an honor to have you with us in Gutun Zuria, sharing also this evening a conversation with Almudena Cacho. And we also acknowledge Almudena for taking this challenge of interviewing Siri. And I think, well, it goes without saying that there's not much to add, because I've seen the Blindfold film, and I didn't know, I loved it, and I didn't know it was based in one of your novels. And then I had the occasion last year to read A Blazing World, and I really loved it. Not only whatever is related to arts, which is very interesting, but also the thinking behind that story that was so special. So, well, of course, you know, she's got many awards, and she went to Columbia University. She did English, and apart from that, I think she is an expert in psychiatry. And then we will be delighted to listen to her. Thank you. Thanks sincerely on behalf of the whole team organizing this festival.
Yo creo que o bien hay periodistas que queréis hacer preguntas.
So now, if a journalist, do you have questions, or otherwise, if you want, I can make questions myself. But I think the idea was for you, journalists, to make questions, to ask Siri whatever you want. Well, like, for example, is this your first time in Bilbao? Good morning. I would like to know if you, as a feminist, as somebody that defends minority rights, like women's rights, minority rights, and also, since you speak Norwegian, whether you have a special interest in our language, in Basque language, and whether you know some literature in Basque language.
I think one of my early encounters with Basque was through linguistics, right? So in linguistics, we know that Basque is an isolate, and that has definitely fascinated me. What does it mean to have an isolate language? I also followed the 2015 paper by the Swedish geneticist who may have discovered some of the genetic lineage of the Basque people through the Middle East. Mm-hmm. All of this fascinates me, and it is interesting that apparently for thousands of years, Basque identity has been something protected, defended in multiple ways. So that it's a fascinating history. Even though the early parts of it, as I understand it, are not are a bit vague. Before the Romans.
If it was before the Romans.
Oh, I know it's way before the Romans. What I'm saying is the exact
The origin
the
is not very
origins
well-
is not that are still not known.
No.
Not really.
They are
No.
different theories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I'm
Perhaps he
I'm
has-
interested, but I'm not deeply knowledgeable. I have a kind of, superficial knowledge that relates to my fascination with Basque as an isolate, with genetics, which I do read regularly. That's my answer.
Entiendo que no ha tenido la oportunidad de leer.
I understand you didn't have the occasion to read any Basque piece of literature translated into English.
Coming to mind, and it might be that I've been just talking too much, and my mind has gone a little fuzzy. But at the moment, I can't think of anyone. But I actually corresponded with someone who wrote to me about a conference here, talking about the possibility of Basque as a language that might disappear as a literary language. So I did have this correspondence with a Basque writer whose name, of course, now has vanished from my brain. But this is an interesting question about small languages. And I have to say, because of Norwegian that you mentioned earlier, only 5 million people speak Norwegian. In that culture, the language is very small. And I personally have been a defender of getting works translated from Norwegian into English, into other languages, because I think it's a way for us not to defend Norwegianness, but to increase the richness of American and English culture by making sure that we're not neglecting small languages.
Y ya que ha dado pie a la pregunta, su primera impresión con la ciudad, con Bilbao y con...
So what is your first impression of the city? What is your first impression with the city and the festival?
I was very excited to come here because I've never been to Bilbao. I've been to some of the other cities in Spain. I confess that my connection to the city is very much about the museum. And I've been a great fan of Louise Bourgeois for many years, so I'm looking forward to seeing the
great.
spider. I'm looking forward to seeing the collection, and I know that there's an abstract expressionist show there now. All of this interests me a great deal. And from what I can tell, my first impressions is that I think it was 1997 that is
Yes,
that
the
right?
Guggenheim
That the
opening,
Guggenheim was
yes.
built, that it's made an imprint not just in that Frank Gehry building, but elsewhere in the city. I looked at the entrance to one of the subways yesterday, very elegant. Some of the other architecture in the city seems to have followed suit. So that's an impressive intersection of culture and economics. Something I believe in.
Great.
Yeah.
Hola, buenos días. Yo quería...
Good morning. I don't think if we could say you are going like on a tour, presenting your last work. And first of all, I was sort of shaken by the title, The Woman Looking at Men, Looking at Women. And is this like a group of essays that sort of combine things that don't seem to have much in common, like feminism, art, and science? Can you sort of further elaborate on this piece of work of yours?
The title comes from the first essay in the book, which is an essay that I wrote for an exhibition in Munich of paintings by Picasso, Beckmann, and de Kooning. All the paintings in the show were of women. And while I was writing the essay, I had a working title, Men Looking at Women. seemed to me extremely boring. And when I was well into the essay, I suddenly thought, well, I am the woman looking at the men, looking at the women. The reason it became a larger title for the book was because there is a theme throughout the essays in the novel, I mean in the essay book, in the collection, of the problem of perception. You know, who's doing the perceiving and how are we able to perceive whatever it is that we're seeing. It's not my personal theory, but both in science and in philosophy, the idea that we are simply passive people who take in some kind of realistic external reality seems to be scientifically untenable. That's not how we perceive the world. We are active creators of what we perceive. And because I do bring up the problem of anti-feminine bias in the arts, but also in the sciences throughout some of these essays, in medicine, for example, it seemed to be a title that could hold the entire book.
Sí, hola de nuevo. A mí
Hello again. I'd like to make a short comment about the political situation of the states, and especially about the role of women in the opposition to Trump by means of demonstrations and different activities they're organizing from the feminist point of view. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. He would like to know what is the role played by women in these with the demonstrations against Trump, and from a feminist point of view, all the activities they are organizing.
Inauguration for the march with my daughter. As soon as I found out about it, I knew that I was going to get a train ticket for the two of us to go, and I found a hotel room, probably one of the last hotel rooms in Washington. So that march, there were almost 1 million people, at least 800,000, it seems, in Washington. Most of them were women. There were men, too. In fact, there were signs that said, you don't have to be a woman to be a feminist, something I deeply believe in. And in fact, some of my best feminist friends are men. That was supposed to be funny, but I think sometimes these jokes don't translate. Anyway, it seems that what is being called the resistance in the United States is being, in many places, led by women, which is something interesting. Now, we have to remember that 53% of white women in the United States actually voted for Donald Trump. So women are not a united force against Donald Trump. But I think the women who were profoundly offended by the misogyny that was not just part of the campaign, but I think that helped Donald Trump get elected because he was running against a woman who was demonized over and over again, not only by the right, by the way, but by the left, more by the right, but also by the left. So those women who were deeply offended by the campaign, who are offended by this presidency, have taken to grassroots activities, not just the march, but writing letters to Congress and the Senate, organizing women in neighborhoods to protect immigrants. It's a broad and I think grassroots resistance that we're seeing in the United States. We don't know how it will turn out, but this has given me considerable faith in the possibilities for some change in 2018 when congressional elections come, and also for the fact that we probably, this is my prediction, will not have a two-term president. Some of the women, come on. You know, I can tell you this. When I lecture at conferences, academic conferences, I discovered at one point that the first 3 questions were always from men. Hey, okay.
Pero una mujer ha preguntado ya.
I think a woman already made a question. So what can we expect from him while he is still a president? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen while he is still a president? Hello? Can you? What can we expect to happen while he is the president? What can we expect from him while he is the president?
A man who ran on this idea of building walls, kind of an law and order, very much pro police action, action against immigration, and what we have is a completely chaotic presidency, right? I deeply believe that this man does not know what he's doing. He also has not put enough people in place in the bureaucracy. The State Department, for example, has been gutted. You know, I am sure you can interview people here in this country who will tell you that there are empty places at the top. And this creates instability. I would expect instability. This morning and last night, you know, I briefly get the news on television, and the belligerent actions towards North Korea are truly alarming. So what to expect? We don't know what to expect. And that in itself is terrifying.
Hello, do you hear me? Okay, okay. Okay, good.
A mí me interesa mucho.
Okay.
I would like to know what is the relationship with science, because it is always philosophy and arts and philology as part of your studies, but also you are related to science. How did you get to science from these studies that you did as a philologist? Why then do you get into science and it is so well structured in your work?
This is a good question. Actually, from early on, even when I was in college, university, I became interested in actually Christian mysticism, including Saint Teresa, this phenomenally brilliant autobiography that she wrote, and some of her mystical experiences. And I read about neurological illness in relation to mysticism. So, for example, temporal lobe epilepsy often includes auras that have euphoric aspects, can involve visual hallucinations as well. So, and migraine, which I have, and have had only once, visual hallucination of a little pink man and a pink ox. And I had such a friendly feeling toward them. It was very pleasant, actually, hallucination. And also of experiences of transcendence before migraine. So that neurological aspect of human experience, of human perception, right? Hallucination is by its very nature perceiving something that is not there for someone else, just there for you. And when I was working on my dissertation at Columbia, I became very interested in aphasia, which is a neurological disorder of language. Freud actually wrote a very good book about aphasia before he became Freud.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, when he was still working in neurology. So all of that prefigured my more serious interest in science. And sometime in the late 1990s, I felt that my education was lacking a serious biological piece. That is, how do we really understand who human beings are without understanding more deeply our physiology, right? How we actually work in very material ways. And that corresponded to a huge explosion in brain research. As everyone knows, in the last 50 years, there's been an explosion through new technology. And I decided that I was going to seriously study neuroscience. Around that time, I met a neuroscientist and a psychoanalyst whose name is Mark Soames, who started the Neuropsychoanalytic Society. And we became friends. He invited me to join a group that met in New York at a hospital, the hospital where I now teach a seminar for psychiatric residents. And every month, we read papers and people sat around a table and discussed the papers in neuroscience. This went on for a couple of years. I was a member of that group, and it was enormously helpful. Yeah. I also attended lectures frequently on neuroscience, read a lot of papers, educated myself, and that's how it happened. And later, somewhat later, I realized that it was also important to try to get some handle on genetics and what is now called epigenetics, which is gene expression and suppression through the experiences of the animal, right? We're animals too. How, for example, stress can change the DNA after replication. In other words, during the lifetime of the animal, there can be molecular changes in the DNA, which it appears can then be inherited. You know, remember Lamarck, everybody?
Lamarck?
Lamarck.
Lamarck.
Yeah. Right? Everyone said Lamarck is a crazy person. You cannot inherit acquired characteristics. It seems that
he has.
That Lamarck wasn't so stupid and foolish as everyone thought he was. Anyway.
Hola, buenos días.
I would like to talk about something that I guess you take into account that is related about what you said, that men make the first question in press conferences before women. I read recently a study that talks about how the High Court members are chosen. You have a majority of conservative men, and the women part of that are liberals. And usually, like many women in other fields of life, are usually interrupted by men when they are speaking out publicly. In the Basque country, some teachers at universities say this is very common, and often women, maybe because they don't have a very powerful voice, because from an auditive point of view they cannot sort of overwhelm women, they end up saying, men, they end up saying, well, I will not make a question in class. So I think I would like to know what your feminist friends, male, think of this.
In one of the essays in the book, the essay is called No Competition. I tell a story about being in a seminar that I attend It's mostly psychiatrists. And it's a seminar on the history of psychiatry. You have to be brought in. It's mostly men, and they're mostly old men, I have to say. I'm 62 years old, and I'm a youngster in that group. So that should give you an idea. One of I think maybe there were 4 women of about 16, 17 people in the seminar. And a paper was given. 2 men gave a paper together, co-authors, and a woman tried to ask a question. She was interrupted. She comes back to the question. She's interrupted again. 4 men interrupted her, and I watched it happen. She was a strong, rather aggressive, insistent person, and she was still interrupted. So that, I think, is something. If you're whispering your question, the chances of not being heard are pretty strong. But if you're strongly, loudly articulating your question, you're still ignored. The reasons are elsewhere. When we left the seminar, because, of course, by the time she got in her question, she was really angry. So she kind of yelled out the question. And when I left the room with a dear friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and a medical historian, he looked at me and he said, "Wow, she was mean." And I thought, actually, she was so frustrated. But they didn't see it. You understand? They didn't see it. So this is again about perception. That woman was loud. She was forceful. She wanted to get in her question. When she finally got it in, she was really angry. But the men simply were not taking her into account. Now, I suggest that the way around this is to remain extremely calm, but to make a point of it. So that when the question comes around to her, she should say, "Thank you very much. This is the 4th time I was interrupted. And this is my question." Just to create a little shame in the room. You see? And it works. But women, of course, cannot get angry. You cannot be angry. And that's just practical. It has nothing to do with whether your anger is justified or not, because often anger is truly justified. It's that in those moments, you have to remain completely calm. I know.
Difficult.
Siguiendo por este camino de las mujeres que...
Well, some women, we do not let them speak out loud in different fora. Yesterday, Daniela Eltit, when presenting this festival, she said that Latin American women, when they write, they have less places to sort of speak out loud. How about your experience, even if you do not come from Latin America?
I'm an American. Listen, I think this is a global issue. Of course, I'm most familiar with my own country and certainly with the Western tradition. I think another point I make in the particular essay that I was mentioning before is that, the age-old distinction of the feminine as of the earth, nature, and the body, and masculinity as, spirit, intellect, culture, goes on. It continues. It's not just in Latin America, it's elsewhere as well. And we have to notice what we're doing, that we're devaluing the works of women artists, and enhancing the work of men simply because they are men and women are women. This is a radically unfair bias. And continually so, women who our intellectuals have to fight harder to be heard. It's just the truth, right? Because they will be seen as less than. But cultures have, we have to acknowledge this. It has to be talked about. It has to be part of the conversation of being a person, right? By men and women alike, because women also harbor prejudices against women, And the response to an aggressive, forthright woman is much stronger than the response to an aggressive, forthright man. Even in myself, I felt it in myself. A little surprise, right? So once we recognize how those biases are structured, often unconsciously, we may be able to fight them better. I can see the nodding, wrap it up, right?
No, si no hay más preguntas, ez badago beste galderarik.
If there are no further questions, I think we call this a conference.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you.